so next I'm going to do a demonstration of continuous line, which I did show you earlier for portraiture, but from the still life. So thing to remember with the still life that kind of shows up in this drawing, you want the objects of the still life size. So if I'm drawing the mannequin, I want my drawing to be roughly the size of the mannequin. This is pretty close. You want to go off all four sides. So have your drawing go off all four sides of the piece of paper. And then you want to identify major verticals and horizontals and place them correctly. So I had a very strong vertical here. I didn't want it in the center. I moved it over a little bit to the side to create a more asymmetrical type of design. And before I start, there's three things that I always want you to think about with a still life. The first one is I want you to try to draw everything so it's life size. So if I'm working from this still life, I should be able to take a gourd off of it, set it on my drawing, and that gourd will be roughly the size of what I've actually drawn. So when you set up a still life at home, you're going to have various objects in there. It might get really big, like this one. This one's 5 feet across. You're not going to try to draw the whole still life at once. You're just going to draw an 18 by 24 inch chunk of that. So keep things life size. Look for verticals and horizontal lines in the still life and try to match those up with the vertical and horizontal edges of your paper. So I'll talk about that in a moment here. And the final thing is go off all three sides. Or all four sides. You need to go off all four sides of your piece of paper. So that way you'll have a nice design. So I'm going to start this continuous line. I'm going to use a thin pen this time. I don't have one of those, couldn't find one of those ultra fine Sharpies in my office, so I'm just using a little uniball here, but any kind of a pen that flows freely is fine. So let me start, and I'm going to start nice and loose with a continuous line. I want to get her head up really high, and again, I'm going to hold this back almost like a stick. So I don't need a lot of control. Not to start. I'm just kind of blocking things in. From up here, I'll think about that collar. Then I'll have the chin, and again, I'm going to work in the center of the face, because I think that's always best. So there's the nose, there's the eye, and again, I'm just working out those areas. That's all I'm worried about right now. I'm not going to get any more detail than that. So there's her face block in. Now the big problem with still lifes is there's always a lot going on. And that's part of the reason we do still lifes, is to try to organize space. It's much more difficult than it sounds. It's one of the big challenges in drawing. But as you can see, I'm not sweating it here. I'm just having fun. Something behind her head, I'm not even sure what that is. And then I'm going to come down, and I think I'm going to start the guitar right here. I'm going to start it up a little higher than it is. Get that tip of that boot in there. And then I got a gourd that's coming up. And that's it. That's my design. And well, I should come over here a little bit too. Haven't quite finished this part. But now, at this point, I can slow down, right? And I can start to correct some things. So one of the things I'm going to want to do is think about this eye. And then follow down. It's a nice shadow that runs down along her nasolabial fold, that little fold that we have on our cheek. I'm going to draw that in. And again, I'm not committing to anything. I'm just kind of still roughing things in. I know that with my continuous line, as long as I keep that line moving, I'm going to be happy. I'm going to be doing my job. So I'm just going to lightly start to block some things in. And I'm really going to emphasize the shadows, because those shadows are the things that really, really help bring your drawing together. Now, one of the things that happens with a still life is you end up with something called a focal point. So you kind of find a certain part of the still life that you fall in love with. And you know, that's not unusual. You might really like drawing the face, then there might be something else that I put in here that just doesn't seem real interesting. So you're going to start to build this focal point up, a point that's going to catch our eye because there's so much detail there. But you do eventually need to move away from it. There will be parts to your drawing that are going to be subordinate. And that's okay. Now I got this piece here that comes down the center, and I'm going to have to make some adjustments because I'm a little asymmetrical here. But I can do that. And you always want to make sure to draw through things. When you're dealing with the still life like this, you don't want things to slow you down. So if you have a situation like this, where we have this kind of heart-shaped part of this brace, you just want to draw that right through those little metal pieces. Now these drawings, I'm going to ask you to do for about half an hour. So you might need to take a break in between. So you're going to block everything in. I have a little bit of negative space back here. It's not too much, but it's a lot. So I think I'll draw the pipes, the lovely sanitation pipes in the top ceiling of our drawing studio here that kind of hear every time somebody flushes. So I'm going to draw those in. They're charming. And when we start to work on focal points, areas that catch our eye, sometimes it's kind of nice to create a little triangle of them. So I might come down here and draw this, it's actually a cowboy boot, and I might start to fill that in. Remember I said with blind contour, if your brain starts to hurt, you can just find a little spot and fill it in. Keep that line nice and methodical, and then I can start to create a little focal point down here. It's not going to be all that recognizable, but it's going to have a lot of attention. And that way our eye will look here, and then it'll really quickly jump back up and look here. And then maybe down here where this clasp is. This is kind of fun. So you're just literally going to jump in where you think that thing is and just start redrawing. Draw right on top. The thing that's important about these drawings, and part of the reason I have you do them in pen, is I don't want you to think about erasing them. I want you to think, if I have something that isn't quite correct, I'm just going to draw over it. Because again, like I said, this is practice. And quite often drawing is all about looking at something, drawing it, getting it wrong, and then going back and fixing it, correcting it. It's a very, very corrective, experimental process, and you should do that. You should take that to heart. So you're just going to come in, draw on top of that region, and just reestablish what is and isn't important. And we will just forget all that initial stuff. Little mistakes and things like that, we'll totally gloss over, especially if you come up and create a really, really nice, well-drawn focal point. What we'll do is we'll focus on that. And you can do that too, but you do want to make sure that you deal with the whole design, the whole composition. All right, so one of the things I said I'd talk about is finding vertical lines and horizontal lines and placing them logically and in an appropriate way with the verticals and horizontals in your page. If you look at the still life, I've got that figure there. There's a real strong vertical line running straight down the center of her. These things that are really symmetrical, I like to cut them in two so that we don't have to deal with the symmetry in the still life. There's enough that we have to deal with. But I have that nice strong line. I didn't want it in the center. I wanted to move it over more to the side so that I could show some of the stuff behind her. That was basically the idea of that. And that's called identifying the active and inactive contours. So if you have a real strong horizontal or vertical line, think about where you want to place that in your design. And we'll talk about that more. So this is continuous line. Make sure and mark it so that you know which one it is.